The auditorium was like no other, an ethereal space, its edges frayed by the laws of reality where shadows twisted and danced on their own accord. The stage, composed of seemingly solid white blocks, shimmered faintly as if at any moment it might unravel into something else entirely. Curtains, a deep shade of crimson, hung behind the stage, but they too were not ordinary. They pulsed, rippling as though something invisible was brushing past them, sending waves of energy across their surface. The air buzzed with an almost tangible anticipation. The audience, cloaked in shadows themselves, was barely discernible, their features blurred as if they were not fully present in this strange hollow dimension. Into this charged space he stepped, Coyote, a figure born of shadow, with a mischievous grin that seemed to stretch too far, his elongated snout twitching with the thrill of the moment. His eyes glinted with a gleam that was equal parts charm and chaos, and his two sharp, poky ears flickered as though they could pick up on sounds from dimensions beyond. Draped in a flowing blue robe, shimmering with dark energy, he moved with quick, gleeful steps, as if every inch of him was brimming with excitement. Each movement was precise, yet playful, his body language speaking a language of chaos and delight. His speech began in rapid bursts of high-pitched giggles, echoing through the strange auditorium like shards of glass tumbling across marble. The audience, invisible except for the faintest of outlines, leaned forward, drawn in by his energy, unable to look away. Coyote stepped into the spotlight, and his shadow stretched unnaturally long across the floor, reaching out towards the audience like dark tendrils. There was something sinister in the way his form lingered in that shadow, like it was not entirely under his control. The air, already electric, seemed to hum even louder as he prepared to speak. With a dramatic flourish, he spread his arms wide, his grin widening impossibly. "Oh, ladies and gentlebeans!" His voice was light, sing-song, bouncing around the auditorium. It had the cadence of a showman, luring the audience in with the promise of something spectacular, something unknown. "The time has come," he giggled again, his breathy laugh punctuating his words with gleeful abandon. The stage lights flickered in time with his voice, their glow seeming to react to his energy, making the white blocks shimmer as if alive. "Toys and books everywhere," he declared, pointing behind him with exaggerated enthusiasm. On cue, the crimson curtains behind him briefly came alive with faint images, hazy flashes of toys and scattered books, conjured like fleeting memories from a dream. They disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the curtains to ripple again with that strange, unseen force. "The pathway of Slyko." The air seemed to crackle around him, an almost electric charge gathering in the atmosphere. He took a few animated steps forward, pacing with the grace of a playful predator. His movements were erratic, but there was intent in every step. Coyote's eyes glinted with chaotic glee as he proclaimed, "Primordial transmutation has begun." His fingers twitched as though casting a spell upon the very air around him. Beneath his feet, the white blocks shimmered again, subtly changing, almost warping, as if the words had altered the nature of the stage itself. Then, with a sly grin, he stepped to the side, and as if in response to his motion, a white block rose from the stage. It was smooth, polished, but with an odd, otherworldly texture that hinted at something more. As the block reached its full height, a single eye opened on its surface, a glowing, unblinking eye that cast strange, shifting shadows across the stage. The shadows twisted and grew, dancing as if they had a life of their own, growing larger and more chaotic with each passing moment. "Excellent, wild, and fun." His words were a whisper filled with gleeful satisfaction. The shadows on the wall seemed to respond to his voice, twisting and spinning as if they too were part of his chaotic performance. "I hope you enjoy what we've put together," Coyote said with another sharp, gleeful giggle. The sound of it was like shattering glass cutting through the tension in the air. The shadows on the walls flickered again, jittering with excitement, as though they couldn't contain themselves. He took a step closer to the glowing block, which now radiated a deeper, more intense light, casting longer, darker shadows across the audience. Coyote turned back to the crowd, his grin widening. "Enjoy the show," he purred, his voice dripping with mischief. The eye on the block shifted, its gaze turning towards the audience as if it too were watching, waiting. "The fun." Coyote leaned in closer to the block, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Well, well." As if in response to his words, the lights in the auditorium dimmed, casting the space into a deep half-darkness. The shadows, now more prominent than ever, danced wildly around him, swirling and twisting in chaotic patterns. The audience, barely visible, sat in eerie silence, held captive by the strange, almost hypnotic energy radiating from the stage. It has only just begun. The block at the center of the stage suddenly twisted, shifting and morphing into a swirling chaos fire. Bubbles of pure energy erupted from its surface, floating into the air like weightless orbs of light. The bubbles shed brilliant hues, casting a kaleidoscope of flickering colors and shapes across the stage. The shadows, as if in celebration, danced even faster, growing more intense and erratic, reveling in the chaos that Coyote had conjured. Coyote's laughter echoed through the auditorium, delighted by the display. "No more darkness," he cried, his voice bursting with joy. The chaotic energy on stage pulsed in rhythm with his words, and the shadows seemed to move like liquid now, merging and separating with each beat of the fire. "Fast travel has been unlocked," he announced, gesturing wildly with his hands as though casting another spell. The stage around him rippled as if the fabric of reality itself was bending under his will. "Ooh, neat. Well, that rock," he pointed at a glowing rock that appeared on stage, its surface flickering with vibrant energy. He paused, tilting his head as if considering something. "Where on the map should we go then?" As he spoke, a prop, covered in shifting, flickering maps, rose from the floor. The map shimmered constantly, never quite settling on a single destination, as though they couldn't decide where to go next. With a gleeful skip, Coyote danced across the stage, his robe fluttering behind him like a living thing. "Walk, walk with your feet," he sang, his voice taking on a playful rhythmic cadence, gently down the beam. He twirled once, arms spread wide, the chaotic fire at the center of the stage pulsing with each graceful step he took. "Mary, Mary, Mary." His voice was light and airy, almost as if he was lost in his own world. Then with a sudden stop, he turned dramatically to the audience, grinning wildly. "Nothing is better than sour cream." A soft chuckle rippled through the audience, their confusion evident. Coyote winked, clearly enjoying their perplexity. "Well, maybe one thing." He paused for effect, his grin widening even further. "A palisaded village on a pastry." He burst into laughter, holding his stomach as though it was the funniest thing he had ever said. The shadows on the walls mimicked his laughter, distorting and twisting in sync with him, creating grotesque, warped shapes. Then suddenly, his eyes locked onto someone in the audience with intense focus. "Hey, you there," he called out, his voice sharp. The shadows seemed to point alongside him, as if they too had noticed the person. "Me?" The voice of an audience member came, startled but amused. Coyote nodded eagerly. "Yeah, you. You seem really into that bucket of popcorn you got there." His voice was teasing but playful. "Let's write a book about it." The audience member laughed, their laughter breaking the eerie tension that had built up in the room. Coyote's grin widened, and the chaotic energy on stage seemed to swell around him, feeding off the laughter. "Yeah, you can make a book about it," the audience member replied, leaning into the joke. "And play the game." Coyote's eyes sparkled with delight, the shadows swarming around him in a frenzy of excitement. "Ooh, I do love to play." His feet barely touched the ground as he bounced in place, his energy infectious. Yep. Each word was punctuated with a sharp clap, causing the shadows to twist and shift dramatically in response. "Sure as shit I do," he giggled once more, spinning in place, his robes whirling around him like a dark whirlwind. Coyote's giggles reverberated through the auditorium, bouncing off the unseen walls, twisting the very fabric of the space. The shadows, once creeping at the edges, now surged forward, responding to his infectious joy. They writhed like living things, curling around the white blocks that made up the stage, stretching out toward the audience as if yearning to pull them deeper into the madness of Coyote's world. "I love storytelling," he continued, his voice taking on a softer, almost reverent tone. For a brief moment there was a glimpse of sincerity in his otherwise manic expression. He paused, his eyes narrowing with a sly grin, as if he were letting the audience in on a secret. And myth. The word hung in the air, heavy and potent. It carried with it a sense of ancientness, as though Coyote wasn't just talking about any story, but something far more powerful, something that had existed long before any of them had ever been born. "And I love yapping about all things under the moon," he exclaimed, breaking the spell of seriousness with another wild laugh, his voice climbing higher as if riding on the chaos itself. His words were erratic, skipping from one topic to the next without care for logic or coherence. But that was the charm of Coyote. It was all part of the performance. With a gleeful skip, he began to prance across the stage, his robe fluttering behind him like the tail of a mischievous fox. The shadows followed him eagerly, their forms stretching and distorting to keep up. As he moved, faint shapes began to materialize in the space behind him, flickering in and out of existence. Glowing mushrooms, impossibly large and luminous, sprouted from the stage, only to vanish as quickly as they had appeared. Walking in the fungus kingdom, Coyote's voice was filled with wonder, as though he were describing a real place, one he had visited many times before. The shadows took on the forms of giant mushrooms, their tops swaying as if caught in a gentle breeze, though no air stirred in the room. Or exploring the nightlife of Hamar, he continued, his grin widening as he imagined the dark, strange city. In response to his words, the stage seemed to darken further, the shadows deepening into a more sinister shape. For just a moment, the audience could almost see the twisted spires of a city in the distance, bathed in the eerie glow of an unseen moon. Coyote twirled once more, the energy in the room crackling as his laughter echoed through the auditorium. "Oh, what an adventure," he cried, throwing his arms wide as if embracing the entire world he was creating with his words. But then, for the briefest of moments, his expression shifted. The grin remained, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, something darker. His voice lowered, almost a whisper, and the shadows around him seemed to still, as if waiting. "This journey." His voice was soft now, almost introspective, though it carried the same playful edge as before. What a trip. For a heartbeat, it was as if the audience glimpsed a deeper truth behind his chaos, a hint that beneath all the madness lay something ancient and knowing. But just as quickly, the moment was gone, and Coyote was back to his usual manic energy, spinning once more in a wild twirl, his robe billowing out around him. "How did we get here, you ask?" he called out, his voice once again brimming with excitement. He spun around to face the audience, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Oh, we just kept on walking." His words were punctuated by another sharp burst of laughter, and the shadows around him seemed to ripple in agreement, as though they too had simply followed along without question, swept up in the current of his chaotic journey. Suddenly, Coyote made a sharp gesture towards the back of the stage, his grin growing even wider. "The cave of the past," he exclaimed, his voice filled with exaggerated disdain. The shadows on the walls trembled as if recoiling at the mention of the past. The very concept seemed abhorrent to Coyote, who thrived on the now, on the chaos of the present and the unpredictable nature of the future. "Blah!" He waved a hand dismissively, his expression one of mock disgust. "Who needs it?" As if in response, the shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, mimicking Coyote's scorn for the past. They writhed and contorted, their forms becoming more abstract and wild with each passing moment. It was as if the past itself had become an enemy in Coyote's ever-moving, ever-changing world. Coyote's laughter grew wilder, echoing throughout the auditorium, filling every corner of the strange, shifting space. The chaotic energy on stage pulsed with new intensity, the flickering lights casting bizarre, flickering shapes across the room, as though reality itself was beginning to fray at the edges. "Insanity is so much fun," Coyote declared, his voice filled with a gleeful abandon. He danced in place, spinning faster and faster, the shadows around him spinning out of control, their forms dissolving into pure chaos. Without warning, he grabbed a prop from the stage, a paper bush that had been sitting unnoticed at the edge of the chaos. He held it up triumphantly, as though it were some grand treasure. "Graspy boon bingo," he shouted, his voice rising to a fever pitch. The audience, caught in the whirlwind of his performance, could do nothing but watch, transfixed by the sheer madness of it all. "Best sellers we've written?" Coyote paused, his grin becoming even more wicked, as though he were holding back some terrible joke. "Ha!" He let the paper bush fall back to the stage, laughing once more. The shadows around him flickered wildly, their movements erratic and unpredictable, as if they too were caught up in the frenzy of the moment. With a final dramatic flourish, Coyote spread his arms wide and declared, "That would be 21!" The declaration hung in the air, the audience unsure whether it was a joke or truth hidden within his madness. But there was no time to ponder, for Coyote was already moving on, his manic energy never slowing. "LOL RAR XD," he said, his voice suddenly adopting a strange, almost juvenile tone. "That's some funny shit." His eyes gleamed with mischief as he added, "Good thing I'm smart, or I would be a dummy." The words were spoken with such sincerity that the audience couldn't help but laugh, caught in the infectious energy of his performance. As the laughter died down, Coyote's grin softened, and he took a deep bow, his form folding gracefully as the shadows around him bowed in perfect harmony. The chaos fire on stage flared up one last time, casting brilliant, wild shadows across the room. as if it too were bowing to the audience in a final act of madness. Standing tall once more, Coyote's gleeful laughter was the last sound before the stage plunged into darkness. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, leaving the audience in the void. But even in the silence, Coyote's presence lingered. His laughter, faint and distant, echoed through the darkened auditorium, a reminder that the chaos was never truly gone. It was simply waiting, biding its time until it could rise again. In the blackness, the audience sat, breathless, caught between the real and the unreal, unsure of where the performance ended and the madness began.